I don't want pretty good, and I don't want kind of fun. I want awesome and outstanding and spectacular.
When the dream doesn't match the reality, something's gotta give.
I've been designing dream homes for my clients for almost 20 years.
Just ask luxury designer turned debut author Amanda Greaves.
I've been making other people's dreams become their reality while I was ignoring my own.
Now Amanda's sharing her inspiring journey of transformation on intentional living with Courtney Meyers.
I was running from self-doubt my entire life.
As she steps out of the shadows, it's hard enough to get to that point where you want to change yourself, let alone like other people want to accept this new version of you.
I feel that now if I'm not meeting somebody else's expectations, I just sometimes wonder, do they actually know who I am?
And into the seat of her soul.
Learning who we are is one of the most important things. It's almost like a rite of passage, and I'm loving every second of it.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am so honored and excited to have you on the show today. How are you?
Thank you. I am wonderful, Courtney, and it is a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Well, we are embarking on something really big because you are about to launch your very first book. And it is kind of like a tell-all of like your own experiences going from like one big career. You were designing homes and bringing all this beauty into the home. And then all of a sudden had a moment that just shifted everything for you. And now you're like designing lives. So let's go there because this is a big thing that's happening. And on a spiritual level, just something I know is like, there's a whole shift in consciousness happening across the board, especially with women. And so I'm
just
curious,
gave me the chills. So yes.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is all coinciding for you. I feel like there's something there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, you're spot on everything you just said. I started my own design firm 13 years ago. I've been in the design and construction industries for 20 years. And as an entrepreneur, and I'm quite certain that a lot of your listeners are entrepreneurs, I put my heart and soul into that company. And 13 years goes by in a flash when you don't pick your head up long enough to realize, you know, what's actually been going on around you. And I really started to get burnt out. You throw in the pandemic in there and all of the volatility within the actual industry with rising prices and long lead times. And it was just, I looked at that opportunity, those 2 years actually, as a blessing for me to take the step back I had been asking for so long. I was like, I just need a week. I need a week to figure it all out. And well, I got it in 2020. And that's when I really started to understand that I wasn't fulfilling myself with my career choice, with the projects that I was working on. I wasn't feeling fulfilled and I needed to change. And so while that was going on, I was working on a very large project. The client, he had been a client for 5 or 6 years, and he just kept pushing. Amanda, you're too expensive. We need you to do more. Can you lower your prices? Let's barter for services. I want to do this less. You know, I'm going to go ask somebody else. And then there was harassment elements that went along with it that I just glazed over and pushed aside. But that got to be too much. And that blew up one day. But prior to that, while all of this was happening, I had jumped on the Tony Robbins train back in 2018. And right before the pandemic, I had gone to Date with Destiny, where if anybody's ever been, it is, in my opinion, the most pivotal, life-changing 6-day event you could ever attend. And I came out of there as fresh as a newborn baby, ready for love, completely healed, so I thought, and empathetic, compassionate, wide open, vulnerable. This guy swoops in, covert narcissist, borderline personality disorder, and he wrecked me. He climbed right in and ripped me apart. And I say that anybody that's ever been in an abusive narcissistic relationship understands what I'm saying. It's that push pull, push pull, push pull. I love you, I love you, I love you. They disappear. No answers. No, they come back. I'm so sorry. Da 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 da. And you're like, oh, I'm just glad that you're okay. And there's no reasoning. And so, literally, this is one of the chapters in my book. Back to back. After I was totally done with him anyway, but like he had kept reaching out and I kept kind of, okay, da da da. Sunday night, I get a call from my cousin. She's like, I think you have been dating my best friend's boyfriend. I end up talking to the best friend, same guy, 3 years. The following day, and so then I was like, that's it. Never talk to him ever again. And then the following day, got an email from said client saying, you're too expensive, da-da-da, went through this whole long rant. I replied to him the next day and told him to go where I really thought he needed to and fired him. That was a year ago. And that was my pivotal moment of, I'm done. I'm so done. I've been wanting to be done, and now I have a reason to be done. I got to get all this ick out of my life, all of it. And I got to a point where I just said, there are no more excuses. There is no more nonsense. I'm not tolerating this kind of abuse or conversations or anything from anybody else, but I'm definitely not going to be tolerating it from myself anymore. And I drew a line. I, carved it into the ground. I didn't just draw it in the sand. I carved it into the ground and I stepped over it. And I said, I'm moving on. And it, like, every time I say it, I can feel it in here that it was the right thing for me to do. I had been doing my career for 20 something years. I didn't even like half of the things that I was doing anymore. And so when I started writing this book, during the whole narcissist abuse thing, I'd gone for a hike with some friends and they were like, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Amanda. And I went through my story and somebody said, you should write a book. I said, you know what? That's a good idea. I'm going to write my book and take the show on the road. And that was it. So I wrote the book and now I'm taking the show on the road. I have my big event at the end of February that's going to launch the book out there. And I made a full-blown 180-degree shift in my career, in my life, in my habits, and I did it with intention. And there is absolutely zero reason for me to turn around and go back to where I was.
Isn't that amazing how that happens? It's just that one shift. It's the one thing that pushes you over the edge. And then there's like no turning back. I had the same thing. I think COVID was a catalyst for a lot of us because we had to start to like get quiet and look within, especially people that were very busy, very high achieving, very career driven, because obviously the world came to a stop. I have a lot of stuff that happened to me then, but prior to that, but it was the end of a narcissistic relationship as well. Someone I was engaged to, back and forth. It happens. These things happen. And it takes that. I actually was just talking to Emma Mumford the other day about it. It takes this, like, you get fed up with your own BS is the way she said. She's like, you have to get to the point where you're finally fed up with it. Yes, all this outside stuff is like causing you these issues, but we have the choice to change it. And it takes that one moment that you had made you step over the line. And now I guarantee, I can tell in the way you're speaking, there's no turning back.
Oh God, no. I mean, and I know this has happened to you. You're out for a walk with your girlfriend, or you're doing something, or you're on the phone with the same person that you talk to all the time, telling them the same freaking story that you told them yesterday and last week and last month and a year ago. And I was out for a walk with one of those friends and we just stopped in the middle of the street, and she's very intuitive. She's awesome. And she just grabbed my arm, and I had been telling her the same story. And she said, Amanda, are you done yet? And I was like, oh my God, yes. Yes, I don't want to say this anymore. I'm sick of wasting my own time. I don't want to talk about this story anymore. And it was then, it's a combination of many things. But it was one of those things where I was like, oh God, I'm so yucky right now. Like, I don't want to be that person. And I'm never going to be that person. I just, it's not who I am.
But how are you received now? So a lot of times we make those changes in our life and people love us for who we are. So when we do, and this is a thing that we've talked about a lot on the show, when we do finally get to that point where it's like, we have to change something because we can't go on the way we are, the outside world or other people in our life don't necessarily accept this changed version of us because they loved who we were, and that's okay. But they have to get to know a new version of us. And it's hard enough to get to that point where you want to change yourself, let alone like other people want to accept this new version of you. How did that go for you?
I'm really glad you asked that question because I really am. You get to a point in your life where you realize that, you can count them on one hand, the people that are your base, your core, your tribe, your go-tos. And a few years ago, I had coffee with a friend of mine and I was like, how are you doing? And he just looked right at me. This is before I really started making all these massive shifts. And he said, you know what, Amanda? It's kind of lonely at the top. And I said, oh, okay. And when I started making these shifts, there were some people were like, you're never out anymore. We never see you. You're busy. Gosh, you seem different. And then I started to explain things that I felt so congruent, so solid, so grounded in my statements, in the energy that was coming forward with how I was speaking, that these people, they just didn't get it. And there was something in me that had shifted where I thought to myself, you know what? That's okay. It's all right for me to let go of what is no longer serving me, because there's this amazing Marilyn Monroe quote, and one of the last lines in it says, sometimes good things fall apart so better things can come together. And I read it all the time and I'm thinking, yeah, you're pretty good. You're pretty good. I like you. This is kind of fun. And then I thought to myself, I don't want pretty good and I don't want kind of fun. I want awesome and outstanding and spectacular. And I want this. And so you know what? I've raised my tolerance levels. I've raised my standards and I've changed my mindset, not a ton, but I changed it to the point where I said, I am going to resonate stronger within my own heart and my own soul because I've been ignoring it for too long. And I had an experience back in February when I went to an event that just really cracked me wide open. And it was then that I really started, I was like, oh, I can hear the messages now. I got it. I'm here. I'm ready. And from that point forward, I didn't look back anymore because there was nothing back there that was going to help me out.
Yeah. Well, I think that's that thing. It's like you realize you just don't resonate on a certain level sometimes. And that's hard because you have to grieve a part of you that you're letting go so that you can step into this new version of yourself. And I've even read this, I don't even know who says it, but I've seen it all over Instagram and different things. It's like, there's this middle space where you're kind of like going into this new version of you, but you're leaving back this old version, but you haven't quite reached it. And it's really like murky and it's that lonely climb and you're kind of trying to figure it out. Yes. My mentor calls it the liminal, is it liminal or luminal? One of those things, liminal space. And it is like, I feel like I've been there for the last couple of years. It's like this weird little like space where you're just trying to navigate. Okay, how do I step into this version of me that I know that's always been there, that I have masked, that I have shoved down, that I've done everything I was supposed to do? Just like you, I had a very cool career where people were like, it was glamorous. Everyone's like, that's great. But it wasn't that fulfilling. There's aspects of it that are, and that I needed to learn to take it into what I do now. But, there's a time when it reaches whether it's the universe going to step in with the COVID and say, okay, this job is no longer there, or
Yep.
it's you just being fed up and taking that step to move forward. There is that moment. And then you have to navigate. There's this period of time where you navigate trying to step into this new version of yourself that you know. Like, I know you know this version of yourself, but it seems like you are kind of trying to step into it too.
Well, it's kind of twofold, and it's, I love Pilates. I like yoga, but they call it a practice for a reason, right? I'm definitely more of a Pilates person, but they call it a practice for a reason. And you being in television and in that type of media world, you understand that you can't just step in front of a camera and start speaking your lines. You have to practice. And so I'm going to call it the luminosity phase, right? I love that word. So whether it's the right word or not, I'm not sure. But in this phase, this fair to midland space, this is where we have the opportunity to practice. This is where we have the permission that we have granted ourselves to go through those feelings, go through that messiness. Writing this book for me, which is what I've been doing all year, it was messy. I mean, there were weeks where I literally had to go back here into the middle of my soul to dark places that I hadn't ventured down for 20 something years. And I made myself push through the heartache that I never dealt with, because I knew that if I'm going to be the best version of myself in the next space, I had to let that stuff go. Yeah. And it's this middle ground where we have an opportunity to practice who we want to be. You don't come out walking. You have to learn how to crawl first. It's an opportunity for us to try on a couple different hats and say, this one fits really, really well. And then gain the courage, the internal courage to walk outside and not worry about whether anybody likes that hat on you or not. And for me, again, this culling down of the ones that didn't necessarily fit what my future started to look like, I took it as a blessing. It's creating the space to allow the better things to come in. A year ago, if anybody had told me, Amanda, you're going to be a guest on podcasts and you're going to finish your book and you're going to do that, I would have been like, what are you talking about? I'm in the middle of my chaotic drama. I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And then it all fell apart and I was like, wait a minute, maybe I do. And so for me, it's the practicing who I want to be, and then falling in love with that. It's not pretending, it's understanding. And I'm looking at that practice as my connection with my higher power is definitely more recent than some other people's. And for me, I'm just really getting to know exactly where my soul sits. And I'm loving every second of it. And it's giving me more courage, more power, more understanding of how I can fulfill myself before I have to worry about fulfilling everybody else. So
I love that you call it a practice. Awesome. That is so true, is because we have to practice. We have a lot of practice being who we were. I mean, I have 40 some odd years of practicing who I was,
Yeah.
No one should just think that you're stepping into this new version of yourself and you know exactly how to conduct yourself in that new version of yourself. So I love that you give yourself that grace to practice it. But you've also said a word now a couple of times that I've used a lot, especially when it comes to writing, because I teach people how to write. I ghost write for people. A lot of times it's, the last book I just ghost wrote was a memoir, and it was dark. There was a lot of things in it. And I had to take my client in through some really hard things to relive them. And so you have to heal that to be able to move on. But there's so much courage that it takes to share that story, to get vulnerable. And there's so much, it's almost like therapy for yourself. It's therapy for your soul, but there's so much you can do to help change the lives of others by doing that too, because we can see each other in it. So I love that you're talking about the courage it takes to get vulnerable in that space and to also heal yourself in that process. That's exactly what it is. Courage.
that's been my year. I have pushed myself through those cathartic exercises of the writing, which you very much understand.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was doing it, as the stories were unfolding and I was realizing what was happening, I was healing. And the more I healed, the more I was reading the stories and I'm healing and I'm seeing the lessons and I'm understanding the messages and I'm learning the lessons and I'm understanding the messages and I'm hearing it. And I thought, God, I'm a good writer. This is really fun. But then I thought, damn it, Amanda, this stuff is so good. You can't keep it all to yourself. And that's where the intention for the book started to shift about halfway through, when I really started to pull the lessons out. And it's a memoir / guide to self-discovery. So it's not, it's categorized in a couple of different places, but I have prompting, there's a reader transformation that goes along with my transformation within the book. There's intentions within each story that I have. Figure out what your triggers are. What are your relationship patterns? What are your limiting beliefs? Why are you afraid to do this? And just, it's that digging in. It's that pulling back the layers and understanding who you are. And for me, my greater mission started to come forth the more I wrote. And I started to realize, God, I am not the only one that has ever gone through any of this. And if I can help one woman not make the same mistake that I did here, and if I can help another woman avoid that mistake over there, then all of this is going to be worth it, because our lives are so valuable. And as women, we absolutely want to be able to unify, come together, help each other, empower each other, intentionally direct with love and compassion, knowing that like what I'm saying to you or to her, it's coming from a true place of honesty and empathy and wanting the very best for each other. So the evolution of what's happened for me over the last year has just been pretty outstanding. And it's so funny because the more I talk about it, the more it really settles in. And I guess I'm just practicing. So,
well, I can feel it. I can feel it in your energy when you're talking, but that is true. I think more women are banding together to help support one another. Even when I started this podcast, it wasn't like I was out, and I've said this on the show a million different times. It wasn't like I was out to be like rah women. That was never the intention. It was more about uncovering who we are on an authentic level and trying to, find your voice in a world that we've masked ourselves so long, or done what we should, or played by the rules, or whatever that is. And it's turning into this space for women to really uplift one another, to encourage one another, to find their voice, to share it with others. And I mean, that obviously comes back to the point that like as women, I think we are very, very prone to not showing up as we are. We are prone to wearing the masks. We are prone to, playing that facade out. And, it's now there's this time where it's kind of like, no more. I don't know if it's our age. I don't know if it's the era.
Well,
I don't know what it is.
It could be the age.
Like, I know there's something about hitting your 40s where you're like, I don't care.
I just don't care anymore. You just go do you. I'm happy right here. Yeah. It could be the age thing. I don't know. But if we can share these messages with anybody that's not 40 yet, so they don't get here and make the same mistakes we did, that's what I want to be able to do.
Yeah. So. But I know like there are people that don't. I just remember when I was working on this one show, and it was a round table of women, and I wasn't 40 yet. And they kept talking about, they were all kind of just reaching their 40s, and I was only a couple of years behind. And they were all talking about how happy they were to hit 40, because there was a sense of release. There was a sense of relief. There was a sense of just empowerment. And there was just kind of like this calmness settling into who they were and owning themselves. And they didn't feel like they had to be anyone other than themselves. And I do think there is something that comes with that milestone, but at the same time, I don't like I'm about to be 42, so it's not like I'm that far into it, but like I still
Oh
struggle
yeah,
with it.
no,
And
I'm
when
on the
you
other end of the 40 spectrum.
yeah, but when you live your life, when you live 40 years, you know, wearing the mask, it's really hard to take it off.
It's incredibly hard to take it off. I think one of the more interesting conversations that continues to repeat itself in my life is with my parents. And when
Mm.
I started doing a lot of this healing, now mind you, I still have two, sometimes three coaches for various different things. I went through a lot of therapy. I hired a trauma therapist. I did EMDR, which is eye movement
Yes.
disassociation recalibration or something. That was some powerful stuff. And once I started really breaking through those fortresses that I had been protecting, all this nonsense that never really even belonged to me in the first place, and I started to chill, I would have conversations with my parents, and my mother would say to me, "Are you okay? Are you all right? What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I'm fine. Why?" "Well, you're awfully quiet." And I thought, "Oh, I think I've gotten to a point where I've said all I need to say." And I realized I changed how I communicate with people. And the
Yeah.
people that can understand and appreciate that, they're still around. The ones that don't want to communicate the same way I do, they're not. And my parents were
Mm.
always going to be my parents, but I have found that I had been fighting against the grain of how my mother has been for my entire 47 years on this planet, maybe
Yeah.
46. And once I started to change how I appreciated my mother showing up instead of how I expected her to, it changed everything. Once I started putting the expectations aside and understanding, hey, you know what? My mom is exactly who she is. I have no power to change her, but I have all the power in the world to change how I perceive her and how I actually communicate with her. So if I want a better relationship, I need to be a better communicator. And that's what I started to focus on primarily with them. And then it trickles down. You get that ripple effect with other people. It's made a huge difference in how I have progressed from being around the people that, just kind of suck the life out of you to creating the space to invite the ones in that fill me back up, that I can then fill back up as well. And they're life lessons. And, at the other end of the 40 somethings, I can strongly suggest, it's learning who we are is one of the most important things. And like those women at that round table, it's almost like a rite of passage. We've made it
Mm-hmm.
this far, and now it's like, all right, I don't have to deal with any of that anymore. What's next? Creating that space.
So do you find that it's in releasing the expectations of others that you find a peace and a bettering of your relationship?
Oh yeah. Yep. Because the expectations of others are actually where we want to be within ourselves. And if we can understand, if we can turn our expectations into appreciation and just say, hey, they might be late, but they showed up. I'm so glad that you made it here okay. And stay in
Mm-hmm.
that world, or it's, yeah, trading the expectation for the appreciation of who people actually are. And if you realize that you're not that comfortable or you don't like the people, and it's hard to appreciate a narcissist or somebody that's totally self-centered without any positive, feedback, or somebody that's just toxic and negative in your life, well, then you just make the choice to step aside and go elsewhere. They will, once you start making those shifts, people will start to fall back and the right ones will start to step forward.
So how do you navigate when people have expectations of you when it's flipped and you're not living up to what they expect you to be?
Nobody's asked me that question in a while. It's interesting. Again, it goes back to my parents. I'm really glad you asked me this question. I have learned to stand in my beliefs even stronger. And I think part of the reason why the book is called The Chameleon Diaries, and because we have talked about all the masks that we wear as women, is based on the limiting beliefs of me feeling like I was never enough for my family, or I was too much for them, or I wasn't lovable, or whatever they may be. I grew up with, I was running from self-doubt my entire life. And it's those expectations that I was running away from. And I feel that now, if I'm not meeting somebody else's expectations, I just sometimes wonder, do they actually know who I am? And I'm at a point now where I either choose to try to explain it to them, or I choose to just say, this is who I am at this moment in time. Is there anything I could have done differently? You know, like it's a catch-22, but I'm going to really think about that one a little bit deeper.
Well, even when you're saying that, I'm thinking, okay, they may, whoever it is that we're talking about that might have that expectation of you, they may not know who you are. But then I argue, and I've had this conversation on the show before, that a lot of us, especially as women, don't even know who we are.
Well, I think I knew you were going to say that. I felt that was going to be coming because the people whose expectations that I am not meeting, or that I am failing at in that capacity, I can see where their limiting beliefs lie within them. And it's a projection of how they feel sometimes about themselves when they're like, well, we just love you. We want the best for you. And my thought is, because you're afraid of failing. I'm taking this giant leap of faith without a backup plan, although we all have backup plans somewhere. But I'm putting all of my eggs in this basket, and you're concerned that I'm going to fail. I'd rather focus on the future of how I'm going to succeed. So their limiting beliefs keep them here. And I'm realizing, and that's where their expectation is. And I'm realizing that the expectation I have for myself is appreciating the fact that I know that my intentions are set there. And my point is to try and break through those things that have been holding me back for so long. Are you kidding me? I'm going to go stand on stage in front of, I hope, 800, 700 people, right? For one of the first times at the end of February. And there's a ton of fear behind that. But you know what I'm doing? I'm practicing. I am practicing what I am grounding myself. I am getting it into the fibers of my nervous system on who I am, who I have become over this past year. And I want to blow people's expectations out of the water and go from there. And I think it's just a matter of putting all the nonsense aside, creating the space for all the really wonderful things to come in, and owning exactly who you are.
Yeah. So how do we really go about breaking through these limiting beliefs? Because so often it's talked about, they're subconscious, they're like rooted in us. So it's like, it is a challenge. Even today I actually was the first day I started 75 hard, because I'm like, I got to do something. I got to make a change for my health. And so I started this, and I went on a walk really early this morning with my dog, and I didn't put in my headphones because it was dark and I wanted to be aware. And so I had to be present with myself. So I had to listen to my racing mind. I couldn't put on a podcast or music and get away. And I couldn't stop sometimes those thoughts that just are limiting, those negative thoughts, those fears that just want to come up. And so I started, for the whole 45 minutes that I was walking in the dark, was saying a mantra to myself, like the things that I want to rewire into my mind, because it's like, okay. And I caught myself going into a negative space, and I did the whole Gabby Bernstein thing, cancel, delete. No, we're moving on. I forgive myself for saying that, and push forward to changing that thought to something new. And I'm like, this is what I need to do. But like, how do we really push past those? Because sometimes these limiting beliefs have such a hold on us that it's not that simple just to say, I'm not going to think that way, or let this fear, go.
I totally hear you. I actually made a pact with myself, because I take my dog for, I would like to take him for more walks, as would he, but keep running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
Where I don't listen to anything. And there have been many times
Mm-hmm.
where I intentionally leave my phone at home because
Mm-hmm.
those are some of the only times where I have a chance to let the thoughts breathe. And you're asking, sometimes it's not that easy to leave your phone at home because you have an idea and how are you supposed to remember it? You need to jot it down somewhere when you are out walking. For me, I genuinely found that I went to look for the help that I needed. I reached out to professionals and asked them to help me uncover my crap. I finally got to a point with such a traumatic event. There was trauma, like emotional, deep, dark trauma that got pulled back up during a couple of the situations over the last couple of years. And that's when I sought out a heavier hitter in the world of therapies. That's when I said, I can't just talk this through. I got to do something that breaks it through my psyche. It's the physiology, it's the language, the focus, and how my body is actually reacting. And for me to break through some of those limiting beliefs, I genuinely needed help from professionals. And it's so crazy because I remember when I was 14, I said to my mom, I was like, Mom, can I go talk to somebody? She's like, talk to your guidance counselor. I'm like, no, they kind of suck. Da, da, da. I want to go talk to a therapist. Now, this is 30 years ago. She's like, absolutely not. Everything's fine in our lives. You don't need a therapist. You can talk to me. And I was like, you're the problem. But
yeah.
And I love my mother. And she understands. We've had this conversation. But it got to the point now where it's like you fast forward and it's 2024 now. Therapy? That's just a common word. Everybody has a therapist. And I love it. I feel bad for the therapist because now they're probably a little overworked and undervalued. But I think therapy, talk therapy, art therapy, emotional trauma therapy, it's not for everyone. And for some, it's not even for the lighthearted, because if you're willing to do the work, if you know you have those limiting beliefs, Courtney, and you really are like, God, I don't want to do this anymore. We all have it in ourselves to do it, but sometimes we need a little push. And sometimes we need to hire people to pull it out of us. So knowing is one thing. Taking action on actually doing something about it is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I call it intentional action. You have to have the awareness and then you have to take the intentional action. And I agree with you with therapy. I think everyone should have therapy. I've been through years of therapy. I'm on medication for my ruminating thoughts. When my husband and I met, we had both gone through therapy, and we're like happy that we met, that we both have had all these experiences and went through therapy, because now we can communicate better. And it's like, that's like, some people would say that's a red flag. I'm like, no, that's a green flag. He's willing to do therapy.
The work.
And you do. I've always talked about therapy in a sense of, it's like, it's like any sort of addiction, any sort of treatment. You have to be willing to do the work. But there are some times that I think you need to go beyond the talk therapy, because sometimes there's only can go so far. So I haven't done EMDR, but I've actually had it suggested to me once before, ages ago. And I've talked to EMDR therapists on this show about it. And it's just, it really causes some big breakthroughs. So that's really fascinating. And that's, and I've even looked into like subconscious reprogramming, or not like hypnosis to do subconscious reprogramming. There are other ways to do this.
Our history comes with us wherever we go, whether we want it to or not. And it's in our DNA. And what some of these things do is that it gives us the opportunity to almost shock the system and reprogram how we perceive situations. A lot of my EMDR, it was triggered by some traumatic experiences over the last 3 years with that ex-boyfriend. But it went way back to stuff that I never even recalled that it was there. And then when she pulled me back into that space, I was like, oh my God, I remember that. But you block it out, because you stack all this rest of life on top of the things that you're like, I don't have time to deal with it. So you don't deal with it, but it doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't
so you actually remember it when you go through EMDR?
I went through probably 3 or 4 different situations in my life. Some were more recent. Some was One of them was when I was like 4 or 5 years old. But once you open the door to that particular situation, at least in my experience, once that door was opened, I was brought back to the 5-year-old Amanda. And when I was in that 5-year-old state, even afterwards, that 5-year-old was now still running around in my mind, and different memories started to pop up. Different things started to come together. And I started to see where some of these limiting beliefs actually started. So it's like the residual effects of going through those therapeutic conversations and those experiences, they compound. And when you open the door to your 5-year-old, your 14-year-old was big for me, 17-year-old, 25. You allow them to step into your present moment and talk, and you can talk to them. This is all child trauma therapy, your parts and pieces. But for me, that was integral to me being able to intentionally move forward and allow those old parts of me to know that I have been here the whole time, and that there's, no hard feelings. Let's bind together and move forward instead of hanging on like anchors and keeping ourselves down.
Wow. I mean, it sounds so heavy that to me, it's like, I want to do it now. Am I just a masochist here? I don't know. But you have to want to do this work to heal. And a lot of people are not going to want to go there. Anything that we're doing to step into who we truly are and own ourselves, it takes that intentional practice, like you said, to want to do it. And it's never easy. It's usually dealing with some dark stuff. It's usually hard stuff. It's scary. Yeah. It's sad, whatever it may be. It can do the whole range of emotions. But so many of us, I feel like, just want to numb and just pretend those things aren't there, or that we don't have these emotions. And all of us do. I don't think there's one person walking this planet, maybe a brand new newborn baby that doesn't carry this with them. But I mean, if you really want to go down the spirituality path, we're carrying our ancestral trauma. Our souls have other lives,
yes.
Like there's so much comes into it. I don't think anyone is here with a completely clean slate.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And you talk about the generational trauma and breaking those cycles. And I feel, and my cousins have said to me, because I have a few, they watch, and they're all watching from afar, and their family, like the family's always going to be the family, but they're watching from afar, and they're like, we're watching what you're doing, and it's amazing. They're actually, without understanding this vocabulary, they're like, you're breaking some cycles. And I was like, I was done dealing with it. Thank you for recognizing that. But it's like, you were like, oh my God, I want to go do this now. And I applaud you for that enthusiasm, because, like, in my opinion, who wouldn't want to? But at the same time, I'm not trying to paint pretty pictures about what these therapeutic sessions go through. I want people to understand that it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that it can't be fixed. It doesn't even mean that you're broken. It just means you're looking for a better understanding as to who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. When you can approach it like that, it doesn't seem so scary. It doesn't seem so bad. It doesn't seem so difficult. But in order to, if it was really that easy, everybody would be doing it. And it takes courage. It takes courage to want to uncover your why, to want to uncover who you really are on the inside, without the headphones on your walk, without the makeup, without, whatever the outside world is dictating we are supposed to do, say, be, look like, listen to, feel, move, the whole thing. And when you take it all away, what's left? And that's who you really are. Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage. I mean, that's what you have to get vulnerable with yourself, and not only courage, it takes the ability to take ownership and responsibility for your part in it. Because
100%.
as much as we can blame others and we can blame generational curses or we can blame circumstances in our life, we still acted in whatever way. We all do have to take some sort of ownership. So I think that's a lot of the work too, is people don't want to take necessarily responsibility for their own shit.
Well, because it's admitting that maybe they didn't do something right or they're not perfect. God forbid. And it's, and that's why I'm saying that's, I guess, when we started all of this, it's like, you have to practice that, like 2-3 years ago, was I really comfortable talking about my limiting beliefs and putting my hand up and being like, I have self-doubt, like, no. I was standing there being like, I'm courageous. And then I'd go cry in the closet. And it's like, now I'm, you get to a point now where it's like, are you kidding me? I just laid it all out into a book that anybody can buy. Anybody. Anybody.
Well,
that really hasn't hit yet. So
it's going to hit, but I also think it's funny that like we're sitting here talking about how imperfect we are and we are showing our imperfections when both of us come from careers that are based on being perfect and produced.
Television, interior design, it's like I've been designing dream homes for my clients for almost 20 years. I've been making other people's dreams become their reality while I was ignoring my own. That was one of the biggest realities that I had. You're on television, and everything on TV is real and it's perfect and it's awesome.
Yep. Yep.
Just like everything you hear on the news.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right.
I think when you live in those space of perfection for so long, you realize how imperfect things are. And then it becomes almost a responsibility or a sense, some part of you that has to like break that facade down, whether it's on an individual level or just to be like, no, not everything is what it seems. These are produced moments. Like, I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from my time in television is like, it's now like 20 years, 18, 20 years of writing for TV and putting words in people's mouths, and crafting the perfect this and that is like it's not real. And people will come to you and they think it's so real and it's not. I don't care how genuine the person is on television. It's still produced. I'm the person in the background scripting it. I can take one word from you said 2 years ago and put it into a sentence today that you said and change the exact meaning of what you're saying. It is so produced. And we need to realize that because we model our behavior, we model who we are after these things that we see, like that perfect home in the magazine or the perfect show on television. And it's not.
Yeah.
We have to let that go.
I grew up in the 80s. So you're just, you were born in the early 80s. I grew up in the 80s. Like, we might be in the same genre of 40 somethings, but that 6 or 7 years is a bit of a gap, to be completely honest. And so we had the high hair, I'd walk out of the house with a whole can of Aquanet in my head. And I hated that. I hated the music, the long guitar solo, like all of that stuff. But you know what? I didn't know what the hell was going on anyway. I just kept going. I just kept strumming the guitar and putting the hair up and doing the thing because that's what everybody else around me was doing. Yeah. I lived in one location, which was more like a city. And then in the 5th grade, we moved to what people at that point in time would consider the country. And they were like, why is your hair so high? Why do you fold your pants like that? Da, 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 da. And then like a year later, I go back to the city to see my friends and they're like, you look like a hippie, so it was like, who the hell am I supposed to be during these formative years of my life? I'm 12. I don't know. So it was, those are the crazy things. I mean, I can't imagine being a kid growing up right now, but I feel like they have, in certain aspects, they have so many more tools and so many more resources than we actually did, that they have the opportunity to dig in a little deeper and do it a little bit earlier than we did. And I applaud the ones that are taking advantage of it. And it's just, those are the generational curses. Those are the things that if we can get into the minds of babes at this point in time and teach them well how to intentionally live their life, how to craft what they want with full intention and meaning and purpose early enough, it's going to be a different place. And like you said, with that shift of energy, I think that there's some really amazing things coming down the pike. We just can't quite see it yet.
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't think we're supposed to see it, but at the same time, it's like, it's all going to be, it's because we're willing. We are now in a generation of adults that are willing to do the work and that are willing to have these conversations and are willing to raise our children in a different way so that they can be themselves. So I think there's blessings and curses to children at this time. I mean, my kids are really young, so I'm really curious to see how they grow into this. But I know like parenting styles, are different. They're different every generation, each my kids will parent different than I do, and I'm sure I'm parenting different than my parents did. And it's always going to be that way. And hopefully we're always evolving in a better way so that we create better spaces for us all to show up more as ourselves.
It's a beautiful opportunity for everybody. So,
yes. Well, I am so excited to hear about your book. Where do we get it? How do we pre-order it? I know we're about to have your big release and it's going to be available everywhere. Yep. So tell us where to find it, how we get involved, and how do we follow you so that we can hear you speak more after this big event. I'm sure you will be speaking a lot more.
I'm sure. So, where and how and when. So it'll be available on all of the standard online resources, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, those types of places. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get into as many local and community-run bookstores as I can. So I'm here on the North Shore in Massachusetts, so I'll be beating the streets in a few weeks to just get out there and say, hey, can I put my book in your window? But aside from that, it is, I believe the launch date is scheduled for like February 28th, February 29th. And at that point in time, that is when it's all going to open up. I have a big party at the Cabot Theater in Beverly on the 29th. And so it's going to be a combination of public speaking as well as reading excerpts from my book. There'll be an interview with me and one of my coaches. And so from that point on, it's game on. I mean, I've got the time now to practice. And then once it all starts to come out, I'm stepping right into this new version of myself that I have been creating intentionally for the last, 47 years, but really, really focused for the last, call it 18 months. And I'm psyched. Yeah. And, my website is pretty straightforward. It's amandagreaves.com. AmandaGreaves.com. So it'll bring you to my courses, consulting, speaking engagements, the book, maybe another book. We'll see.
What's the title of the book?
Title of the book is The Chameleon Diaries, Designing a Life Worth Changing For. So
just want to make sure everyone can look that up so we can go and pre-order it.
The very bright cover. So I'm very, very excited about it. Again, I don't know who wouldn't be excited about launching their first book, but the subtitle of Designing a Life Worth Changing For, that definitely was an evolution. And I'm psyched I was able to tie in the interior design aspect of who I am back into the title. Because it's not about me running my business. It's about everything else outside of it.
Well, congratulations. I'm so excited for you.
Thank
you so much for joining me today. And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Amanda Greaves, for joining me in such a great conversation all about stepping into our power, owning who we are, and really getting vulnerable and doing the work on ourselves. If you want to get her book, follow her journey, or work with her, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have going on. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.